Despite our growing trust in Nancy, I remained vigilant, closely observing her every move in the kitchen. I monitored every meal's preparation, my suspicions never fully abating. After weeks of eating Nancy's delectable food, we had inexplicably developed an extremely strong craving for hard drugs. One fateful night, temptation got the better of Josh and I. Driven by our intense need for a high, we locked Nancy in a bedroom closet and drove her sedan to Prescott to score some meth. By the time we got back, we were high as kites, and we let our guard down completely, forgetting to keep a watchful eye on Nancy. She was as quiet as a mouse, and did not beg to be let out of the closet, which is just as well because Josh and I had forgotten that she ever existed, and we crashed on a large Victorian couch in the parlor. That morning, our ignorance proved costly. We awoke with severe munchies and immediately did several lines of coke. We stretched and yawned as the delicious smell of freshly baked oatmeal cookies wafted in from the kitchen. Our minds were clouded and numb, and we ran like dogs toward the treat. Nancy was leaning against the kitchen island, smiling at us like Mother Teresa, calmly sipping from a tiny steaming coffee cup. On the counter sat a huge plate of large, delicious-looking oatmeal cookies, a large pot of hot coffee, 2 huge, empty coffee mugs, and behind it all, 2 wooden figurines. "Good morning, sleepyheads," Nancy grinned, the smile existing only around her mouth. "I thought you might be hungry after your night out, so I made you some yummy treats," she murmured. As the morning sun cast an eerie glow over the kitchen, Josh and I devoured the warm cookies with gusto, washing them down with steaming cups of freshly brewed coffee. We were way too high to think about what we were doing or how Nancy had managed to escape from the bedroom closet. Little did we know, our ravenous consumption sealed our fate. The poisoned cookies instantly took effect. Josh and I dropped, and we began to writhe in agony as the pain hit us like a freight train. We loudly moaned, our bodies convulsing uncontrollably on the floor, our faces contorted with deep grimaces as we felt our insides melting. Our screams filled the air as we struggled to endure the torment coursing through our veins. "Scream it out, dearies, that's right," Nancy sneered. She leaned back on the kitchen island, stretching out her upper back and one shoulder, calmly sipping her drink. Her dark eyes were lidded and soulless. She slowly cocked her head to the side to watch us in a detached, matter-of-fact way, as if we were germs squirming under a microscope. Josh gasped for air while I bent over, clutching at my dissolving stomach in absolute misery. Our limbs twitched and spasmed. My movements sent shock waves of pain shooting through me. Despite our desperate pleas for help, there was no relief from the relentless torment. We were trapped in a nightmare of Nancy's making, our suffering a testament to her cold-hearted revenge. I had to give the old witch props, though, even though she killed us. Well played, Nancy. Well played. Josh's convulsions finally subsided, and I watched the light leave his eyes. In case you were confused about the dynamics of our relationship, dear, Nancy's voice cut through the air, dripping with contempt and malice. You're here because I led you both here. I have always been the cat. Right from the start, and you witless creatures, merely the rats. You were finally fed the poison you deserve. I stared up at her, my expression a mix of shock and awe as the truth of the situation became irrevocably clear. I died gasping and choking, my eyes wide with surprise.
Epilogue. With a cold detachment, Nancy Franklin stepped over the expired bodies of Josh and Lisa and proceeded to wash the breakfast dishes, her hunt complete. With determination, she fetched a large caustic pot and an axe from the nearby storage room, along with the other chemical supplies needed for her immediate plans. She was still in a weakened state from the physical turmoil the sadistic couple had put her through, but she would soon regain her full strength. Her shoulder, however, would never be the same. She paused to catch her breath and to gather her thoughts. In her youth, Nancy was considered to be odd. She was never lonely and found great solace in her own company. She despised her materialistic, self-absorbed siblings, and they, in turn, hated her and feared her. The only person in her life whom she loved besides her deceased mother was her father, who often treated her as an afterthought. Nancy became fascinated with death. Why had her mother died and left her in this cold world alone? In her solitude, she would taxidermy her deceased favorite pets. First her birds, then her cats, and then her dogs before her father put a stop to her odd behavior and sent her away to give her a more normal focus in her isolated life. After she had graduated with top honors from first an exclusive all-girls private school and then a highly reputed culinary school, Nancy traveled the globe as an elite chef. Eventually, she secured a position as one of Queen Elizabeth II's top personal chefs. However, Nancy didn't like the rules and restrictions of the position, so she gave notice after several years and continued her world travels to exotic lands, tasting and exploring exciting and forbidden cuisines. On vacation in East Malaysia, she found herself residing with a tribe of headhunters in Papua New Guinea for several months. However, the PNG headhunters no longer practiced the taking of heads, a practice that Nancy studied and grew increasingly enamored with. They were content to sit back and reflect on their glory days as honorary headhunters for the British Armed Forces. She continued her search for an active headhunting culture, and she soon found herself in Borneo, and after several years, she was adopted by the tribe's chief to learn their ways. And learn she did. She was no stranger to violence. She now worshipped it. She adored it. And the headhunter culture she immersed herself in gave her freedom like never before to explore her shadow self. Her initiation into this culture was the very reason she maintained the practice of human sacrifice and headhunting to this day. She would always protect her territory and prove that she was a worthier warrior, unlike the forgettable trash she'd periodically lure into her home and slay. Once inside, they always did horrific things to her, which made her eventual victory over them that much sweeter and that much more gratifying. Their torture of her, the ugly scars, the terrible wounds, and the crippling injuries they heaped upon her body were her badges of honor. Her mansion's walls were adorned with some of the heads of the junkies who had attempted to overtake her in her recent past. She had failed at using Jimson weed on one of them to gain a tactical advantage, the lumbering oaf collapsing onto her in her kitchen in a fit of delirium. He had pinned both her arms above her head with one of his huge ham hands, breaking a beer bottle by the side of her head with the other. Then he slobbered over her as he raked the bottle's sharp, ragged surface across her left inner bicep. She prided herself on being able to easily take all forms of physical pain and punishment without emitting a sound, so she did not cry out in pain. Rather, she did what had to be done and managed to quickly tilt her hip up, causing the huge man to topple off of her. As her drugged prey slowly attempted to gain his bearing, Nancy swiftly sprang to her feet, grabbed a cleaver, and ended him with one clean whack to the back of his neck. There was blood splatter everywhere that day, and Nancy was not a sloppy killer. This was primarily why she resorted to using her prey's filthy drugs against them versus ancient potions. She would confiscate and stockpile their pharmaceuticals after she neutralized them and use these highly effective poisons on the next batch of prey she lured into the mansion. She kept an arsenal that was well stocked in crack cocaine, methamphetamines, benzodiazepines, fentanyl, marijuana, and heroin. Pouring herself another cup of espresso, she leaned against the kitchen island again, taking sips of the strong brew as she mentally rehearsed the steps to primitive soap-making. She had learned this from a family in the tribe she had stayed with. She had also conditioned herself to tolerate lethal poisons. Indeed, her mastery of this primitive pharmacology was quite impressive. She had ingested heavy amounts of snake venom and deadly plants during her sojourn in Borneo, and she now continued to imbibe upon these lethal concoctions. This was why the illegal street drugs the pair kept plying her with had little to no effect upon her. She could have become a chemist, her knowledge of herbs and pharmaceuticals being so extensive. This skill set certainly assisted her in conquering many a foe. She was also able to periodically escape from her bindings to prevent bed sores from forming on her skin during days when the couple was away, spreading nonsensical lies about her to the townies and spending her couch change. Occasionally, she would use the bathroom when she needed to pass a bowel movement, but she would also allow herself to remain bound as she released her bladder on that urine-soaked mattress, lest her jailers suspect that she hadn't been truly restrained. She had allowed them to feed her filth and to starve her to nearly 2/3 of her fighting weight, and she had been prepared to take them out if they hadn't soon adopted her lonely heart's ploy. Her machete, knives, axe, and poison dart gun were safely hidden in different secret passageways of the mansion that led to the master bedroom. She was highly tempted to go on a killing spree the night that dirty tramp had broken her finger, but she reined in her rage and decided to play the long game for a more satisfying outcome. It was true that Nancy's affluent kin had been incinerated in a tragic factory fire, leaving her alone. It was a fire she had skillfully set and escaped from. What the sheriff department detectives hadn't discovered, and the news outlets hadn't covered, was the fact that all of the bodies were missing their heads. Miraculously, Nancy was never suspected of any wrongdoing since she had also been in the factory during the fire, having positioned herself in an area of the building where an easy exit was assured. The Franklin family had an extremely powerful influence over the town of Dead Tree. They had even handpicked the town's mayor and sheriff, and they had almost completely funded the respective political campaigns of these individuals. Nancy had reconnoitered her family's solicitors at the time to shield her from any trace of slander and false accusations, and to eventually bestow upon her the vast Franklin fortune. She also maintained the family tradition of bribing town political figures and the local newspaper in order to bend their power and authority to her will. This coercive behavior made her both hated and feared by common townsfolk. Her erstwhile captors claimed to be her family, so they would join the rest of her family on the walls of her mansion's galleries. And she was no stranger to hiding bodies. The best thing to do was to hide them all in plain sight. She smiled at the thought of adding more heads to her collection. Now, she would have a pretty one with long red curly hair. After she dispatched the last junkie couple, Nancy returned to her solitary life in her mansion of hidden passageways and poison-filled botanical gardens until such time when the urge would strike her again. When Sheriff Chester Parks paid a visit to the Franklin mansion in mid-October to conduct a wellness check on Nancy and to beg her for a political donation, she assured him that an impressive check was already in the mail and that she was fine and no longer in need of any medical assistance from the young couple that had come to stay with her. She informed Parks that she had sent them home weeks ago, which was partially true.
This concludes the 6-part miniseries, Rat Poison. If you followed along and enjoyed it, or you are enjoying my other videos, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell. Your support is much appreciated. More awesome videos to come. Take care, folks.